I think you'll enjoy this nice short tutorial called Peaceful Pastels. Very limited coloring on this, nice and simple. You're going to be using your large flat brush, 2-inch flat, a number 8 or number 10 round. You'll be using a number 2 round and your rigger. You're also going to be using salt today. No biscuit, nothing like that, just some salting. We're going to use cadmium red. We're also going to be using cad yellow to make that nice peachy color. If you don't have cad red, you could certainly use alizarin crimson in its place. We'll be using some deep indigo for the sky and the water. And in some areas, I mixed that indigo with some cerulean blue. And of course, we'll be using a little bit of black. You want to make sure for your drawing that you have your horizon line put in and you have your little cabana put in. We're going to start with the sky and we're going to wet the sky area from that horizon line about 3/4 of the way up. You don't have to go to the very top, but if you do, it's certainly not going to hurt anything. We're going to be putting in our lighter colors first, our nice pastel yellow and peachy color first. So we'll be starting first with cad yellow, and then we're going to be mixing that cadmium yellow with some of your alizarin crimson or your red to make that nice peachy color. So your yellow color is going to go first up on top, and then we're going to bring that peach color all the way down to the horizon line and let them blend and bleed together. Nice soft color. Remember though that your coloring is going to lighten as it dries. So you don't want to be too light when you put that color on, because then it's going to dry much lighter than you want it to be. So you want that peachy color and that little bit of yellow coloring, to be a little bit darker than you would anticipate, because it will dry lighter. There's also going to be a real light wash of your indigo over these colors at the very end. So if they're too light, that indigo is going to make them totally disappear. We're going to go down into the water then, and about midway in the water, you're going to put a nice thick band of water, because we're going to brush in some of that peach color so we get that nice reflective peach color in that water. Just some nice peach color. Again, remember it's going to dry lighter, so you want to make sure that you have it, the color a little bit darker than you would normally anticipate. That has to dry really well. And then we're going to put in that deepest band of solid water right below the horizon line. You're going to water down your indigo color. I wet right above where my peach color is in my water, so that I would have a little bit of a soft blend when my indigo blue gets to that point. I don't want too hard of an edge. So I just put a little bit of water right below where my indigo is going to end, and then that way I'll have a little bit of a softer bleed. I don't need it to be running down to the bottom of my paper, but I just don't want a really hard edge yet. All the way across, a nice even band. And then that even band I'm softening just by allowing my paint to run in all directions. And then I'm going to salt that. You're going to let that salting work, dry it really well, brush off all of your salt, and then we're going to put another wash of our watered down indigo on that to soften that salting so that it's not so abrupt. You're still going to be able to see your salting through your second wash, but now with that second wash, we're going to complete the water by first using a rigger, and we're going to go to the edge of that solid water and start putting small ripple lines in with our rigger. Right off of the edge of where you started, you're going to be using both your rigger and your nice big 2-incher. I started with my rigger, nice fine little ripple lines, almost like long thin ovals back and forth all the way across your paper. And I'm bringing that down almost to the edge of where my peach color is with my rigger, and then I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to start doing my lines with my big 2-incher because I want the lines that is in the foreground to be thicker than those nice thin ones about midway in the water. So I'm going to continue on with my rigger, nice thinner lines, but pretty close together. And then I'll pick it up with my big wide 2-incher. Now I'm going to go back up to my solid area. That should be dry now. And I'm going to just dry brush another wash of indigo over that, just so it's not so perfectly smooth. I want it to have some nice texture to it, to look like that water is windblown and some small ripples out in that farther ocean water. You want to make sure everything is nice and dry. And then on the lower left portion of my water, I want to tone down my peach color because I only want my peach color to be reflective in my water towards the center and the right hand side. If you want it to go the whole way across, you can leave it, that is fine, but I want mine to just be in the center. So I used a real pale wash of my indigo to go over that peach water, and I'm just softening the edge with plain water. Make sure that your water is really dry. And now I'm going to put that really thin edge of land in the distance on there. And that is just done with black. So the line that is right up against my water, that needs to be really straight. But the other side of the land, the top of the land, that does not have to be straight. So the straight line right on the water, and then you can uneven that line on the top part of it to make it look more like land. Keep it thin. This is not huge mountain ranges in the distance. This is just a little bit of land off to the distance. It could be a peninsula. It could be, you know, a little land outlet or inlet. So it's nice and thin. It's not a big, thick line. You can use your number 2 round for that, or you can even use your rigger, whichever you feel more comfortable using. Now we're going to go back up into our sky area, and you want to make sure your brush is really clean and your water is really clean, because we're going to re-wet the sky area about halfway down, maybe 3/4 of the way down, and we're going to re-wet just a strip of that. You don't have to wet the whole sky. And you're going to fill that in with your watered down indigo. You want to make sure that lower half of your indigo is hitting your water so that you don't have a hard edge there. And you're going to fill that all in nice and solid. And you're going to have a rolled up paper towel because we're going to blot out some long, thin clouds. So get yourself a paper towel or a piece of toilet tissue, whatever you can work with easier, a longer piece, and you're just going to roll that up, and we're going to press it first along that lower edge because we want to have some nice broken lines down there. You're going to lay it down on your wet paint and just let that tissue soak up that paint. And you're going to work your way up, and we're going to make some nice long cloud lines with that tissue. This is just going to be the first wash. There's going to be a second wash. So you want those clouds to be nice and white. It's going to get toned down later. So don't worry if when you blot them, it goes all the way back to nice clean paper. That's okay, because it's going to get deepened again on that second wash. I'm blotting out my upper left corner, and then I'm going to use that rolled paper towel. You can even roll it on your paper, and I'm going to blot out some of those clouds. Now you want to leave lines of color in between where you're blotting. You don't want to totally blot it back out to white, but you want to have very distinctive cloud lines, because when we tone it down later, you want to be able to see those cloud lines through your second wash. Now while I'm still wet, or at least damp, I'm going to go back to my brush and I'm going to drag some lines through, dry brush them up and down so that they're not just a straight solid line. And I'm doing that mainly just to break up now some of my solid white lines. If your lines are broken and you don't feel you need to do this step, then you do not have to. But I'm just trying to break up some of my long, solid white clouds. I'm dragging a wet brush through, and you see you're going to get that nice wet washback line. I'm going to drag my wet brush through that solid color, and then I will reblot in that area. All of these cloud lines are going to get toned down. So they're not going to be white like that. They're going to get toned down with a second wash of color. But we cannot do that until everything is dry. This is just the first wash of two. Now while that's drying, I'm going to go back down to my little cabana, and under my cabana, I'm going to put a real pale wash of watered down black because I'm already going to start to shadow in that water. I'm not doing a shadow under the walkway out to the cabana because that's thinner, but since the cabana is so round and wide, it's casting a bigger shadow. So I'm using my watered down black, and then I'm going to go up. I'm going to paint in my roof, watered down black. I'm going to throw a little bit of salt on that roof just to give it a little bit of texture. And then I'm going to start to paint in all of my planks. If you don't see your wooden planks and you want to redraw them, go ahead and do that so that you don't make a mistake. And you want to make sure that you're drawing them nice and straight vertically. You don't want to have crooked lines because that will become very evident if you have crooked lines. So if you cannot see your pencil lines, which is fine, then you want to redraw them. You don't have to draw every single post, but you should at least draw a few of them to serve as your guide when you're going to be painting in your other posts. All of your posts are just going to be painted in with black. And you want to make sure that you bring all of those posts down to the same area in the water. Okay, so you want to stop those black posts at the same spot or relatively same spot in the water. The reflective parts can be a little bit off vertically, but where they actually hit the water, they're pretty much hitting the water all at the same level. Continue with all of your nice lines. Make sure you put enough in and then let that dry really well. And we're going to go back up into our sky. Your sky has to be really dry so that you don't get any washback on this. So make sure that you're drying it both front and back of the paper so that it's really, really dry. I'm re-wetting it all the way down from the horizon line about 2/3 of the way up. Again, if you wet the entire thing, it's okay, but you really do not have to. I'm going about 2/3 of the way up with my plain, clean water. And this is going to be my second wash now of that indigo. Same thing, my watered down indigo. I'm covering my whole sky again, and I'm going to re-blot closest to the edge of the bottom. I'm going to add a little bit of plain indigo into the sky, but you can already see where your clouds have been blotted out. I'm going to deepen it here and there just to make sure that my sky isn't all one same tone. So I'm going to drag some color through. Make sure you wipe under your paper so that you don't get any washback. And then I'm going to re-blot that area closest to my horizon line, because that's where I want to get those real fine lines of clouds. After I blot, and while it's still wet, I'm going to be using my rigger, and I'm going to be dragging through some fine indigo lines so that I have real thin lines of cloud down there also. You have to be wet for that though. So if for some reason you've already dried, that's okay. But let it really, really dry and then re-wet that area, and you can go ahead and drag through your indigo lines. But you want to make sure they're nice and fine, and you want to make sure that you can drag them through while it's wet so that you can have nice muted lines. I'm hardening that line that is the edge of my solid blue cloud. I'm adding some additional color here and there. If you don't want any really dark clouds, that's fine. You don't have to add those in. But if you want to have lines of darker clouds, you want to do it while it's wet. You don't want really hard lines. I'm re-blotting out some clouds, so if you want some cloud areas to still be a little bit lighter, you can blot them out. Wait till your paint gets a little bit dry, meaning wait till it gets to like a matte finish before you start blotting. And then you won't go all the way back to a real light color. Anytime you want to put color in, you want to make sure it's on a wet surface. You don't want really hard lines yet. So I am making sure I'm wet, adding those couple lines of my indigo, allowing it to bleed. And I'm even going to dry brush up in there, and I'm going to show you that in a minute. I'm re-blotting a little bit. You can blot anytime as long as you're wet. And then I'm going to take and I'm going to start to do a little bit of dry brushing when I'm done adding my little lines of color where I want it. I'm going to go up and I'm going to break up that white, big white cloud there in the middle. I'm adding some additional color up there. And I'm going to dry brush it both up and down to break up that white cloud area. So there's a lot of different things you can do with these clouds. You can blot, you can dry brush, and I'm even going to show you how you can lift some color Take a paper towel, put that paper towel in your hand so you can blot with it. Wet your brush, dab it off on that paper towel, and you can just wipe areas out with your clean, damp brush. You want to keep blotting it on your paper towel. You're blotting the paint that you're taking off that's on your brush, and that will give you some lighter clouds also. I'm going up and down, taking off some color. This is wet color. This isn't dry color. So you're doing everything while you are wet. Now I'm going to be using my big flat brush to do those sunbeams. And I'm actually just using, it's almost like dirty water, very little pigment on the ends of this brush. So if you're using your indigo color, which is what I used, you want to really make sure that your brush is super wet. You don't want a lot of color. You want very minimal color. And then I moved over to my big number 8 round, and I'm dry brushing at an angle for some additional sunbeams or moonbeams or cloud beams or whatever you want to call these, um, because those have to be really pale. While it's wet, I'm going back in and adding just a couple more little thin lines of clouds where I feel that I need it. If you are happy with what you have, leave it alone. If you're not sure, leave it alone. The next day, tomorrow, a week from now, a month from now, you can always re-wet it and add some cloud lines. It doesn't matter. You can always add, but it's very difficult to take off. Now I'm going to go back in and do my reflective lines in my water, and then I will be done. Your reflective lines are just black, but they're not straight lines. They're straight vertically, but they are not a solid straight line. You're going to shimmy them left and right. And if you have splits in your water, you're going to have splits in your reflection too. So I didn't put any reflection where I had my nice peach color. I kind of kept my black reflections in just my darker indigo water. And you can go different lengths now on your reflections. Some of them can be deep, longer or farther towards the bottom of your paper, but I wouldn't have them going up and down and up and down and up and down. You want to keep them pretty close together, but they don't have to all be exact. The ones coming from my cabana area or my little gazebo area, I made those longer only because the cabana is taller. So you want to kind of pick how you want to have your lines going. Again, you can add on to this anytime. So, if you're looking at it and tomorrow you think some of your reflective, watery reflections need to be longer, you can always do that. Again, making my cabana lines just a little bit longer because it is taller than the rest of the, um, the pier or the walkway. So I made them longer down into my water, and again skipped over where my peach color was and just put those reflective lines in the darker water. Going back to my sky, if you feel you need anything else, I just did a little bit of dry brushing in an area that I thought was too light. So watered down indigo, went back up and adding a little bit of dry brushing. I'll add a little bit with my rigger, couple little lines here and there. Again, little bit at a time. Less is better. You can always add. You can add tomorrow, you can add a week from now, you can add a year from now, but it's very difficult to take off. This was a nice relaxing painting. Again, if you want to add color, just make sure everything is really dry before you try to add any color, and enjoy a nice, quick, easy tutorial. Enjoy your week. Happy painting!